All right. So I think we're good to go. All right. My name is David Marino. I think Vicky, we may have chatted one time, once or twice before. My name is David Marino. I work at Facet. I'm going to be helping out with the chat, with anything in the background. So Ryan did mention that if there are any questions that you wanna ask, you can go ahead and unmute yourself at any point, and or you can post it on the chat as well. So, so today's presentation is given by Ryan Murray. He's a professor in electronic media and film, and also our first Facet Fellow for Emerging Technology. And his experience and background is in virtual reality production, and 360 video, and then virtual environment production, which is what the big thing is going to be today. So thank you for joining us. Ryan, go ahead and take it away whenever you're ready.
Cool. Hi, how you doing? So I'm Ryan Murray, and as David so kindly said, I'm working in the electronic media and film department here, and working with Facet this year to talk about emerging tech. I want to show today the way I have been. All right, here, let me share this screen and let me share this thing. So I want to show the way I've been teaching virtual reality creation or software creation in Unity to my undergrad students in film who have no prior experience doing 3D modeling or programming or game design. This was a brand new thing when I started teaching it last spring. And I'm doing this for some of my own creative scholarship as well. And so I have some tricks up my sleeve about how to use Unity without getting mired into the realm of software development or programming if that's not your experience. It's not my experience, for example. So I found some cool ways to strategize building VR environments in this video game engine, Unity. This is my 7-year-old, by the way, enjoying the example project that I'll be showing you today. So let me show you a couple of quick videos of the kinds of things that can be made with the strategy that I'm going to show today. The first two videos I'll show you are undergraduate projects from last spring, solo projects made actually at home on quarantine with entirely free software and free 3D assets. So this, for example, is like a maze. A VR maze that a student made, again, her first time making anything in VR and Unity. And here we're looking at the kind of final, the winning room when you get to the treasure. And then here, this is more like a kind of surreal dreamscape landscape that another student built last spring. And he's using some interesting tricks to reveal surprises. You know, when he turns on a flashlight, he's got images and paintings and gag jokes and stuff that come out. And all of these 3D models are freely available on the Unity Asset Store. So I'm going to show you how to make use of that. And then here, this is another piece of software, not one of my students made, but this is available out in the wide world on Steam. It's called the VR Museum of Fine Art. And it's using 3D scans from the actual collections of some of the world's best museums to create a virtual reality experience of an art museum. And then, and it was made in Unity. It was actually made, it started as a high school project, believe it or not. A very precocious high school student started that. And then this is a project that was made by a company, so not a single person in this case, but this is the Museum of Other Realities, which is another fine art museum in VR, but in this case, it shows only VR art. And what's cool about that is some of the things like this can start in the scale of sculpture, but then you can teleport into them and change your scale, and now you're just like occupying the world that used to look like diorama scale. So there are, and that also is made in Unity. So there are some really cool possibilities here, and I want to give you a sense of what it would take to mess with this kind of thing yourself. So I'm going to switch over to sharing my main screen here, and I want to run a demo of what I made this past week to show you all. So let me pull that up. So what Unity makes, incidentally, if you're like, whoa, 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 back up, what are we even talking about here? Unity is a it's a video game engine, which is like a piece of software that you can use to build a video game. Now, why that matters for us is a lot of the same technology that would be useful in creating a video game is useful in creating a VR experience. And so Unity can give us a real good leg up on building a 3D virtual world to walk through. It's a free piece of software, sort of, in the sense that if you are an individual, and you're either a student or using it for personal use, which they define as like you're not making a game that makes over $100,000 a year, then it's free. So you would click Get Started. They would ask you to start an account with them, and then you would download and install this software. And then what ultimately you're going to make is an actual executable file. Like here, this facetdemo.exe, like this is a standalone piece of software that I'm going to run. And then, excuse me, while I put on my VR headset, I will take you on a little tour of my own sort of ripoff of the VR Museum of Fine Art concept. So here is a museum space. And this, for example, is the Rosetta Stone, an actual 3D scan of it. You can use video in Unity. This is a loop of an Edward Muybridge sort of early frame-by-frame animation of a horse galloping. And then a lot of these other ones are 3D scanned sculptures from various museums that have been provided for free on Sketchfab or other places on the internet. This, of course, is from the Smithsonian Space Shuttle. Here's Van Gogh from, I think it was the Cincinnati Museum of Fine Art, provided that. Here's a huge, part of what's cool about VR is you can really get a sense of scale. Here's a huge Buddha. And then way up here, I've got some paleontology. This is the paleontology wing of the museum. T-Rex and a mammoth, and then that's just a magic crystal. So anyway, this is something that I made over the course of 4 hours, let's say. So the idea is that I want to show you a little bit about the interface of Unity, take you through maybe like a cooking show or something, you know. So while you're not at the stovetop cooking with me right now, I don't expect you to have Unity open at the moment. I do want to show you a little demo of what it took to make that, so you could get a sense of like, okay, what's the strategy here and what resources are out there. Okay, so before I dive in, what questions do people have? Just with that little like, here's some examples.
I want to ask because I believe I do have Unity installed
Mhm.
in my computer. Like, would it be helpful for me to open it up and follow along as you do the demo, or like, what would you suggest?
Well, you can, but I will say I'm probably going to I can't assume everybody's got it open, so I don't know if I'm gonna stop at every literal step of the way, to be like, okay, this is how you would like literally open a project, and some of that
That's
stuff. So,
okay. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, no
but
problem.
the cool thing is we're gonna record this, so I think the best strategy would be maybe like I'll take you through it sort of at a high altitude, so to speak, and then the second time through with it open. That way, you sort of know where we're going. Um,
Sounds great.
yeah, I mean, if I knew every single person in the workshop had it, I could run it slightly differently. But I think I'll end up boring people who are waiting on us if we get into some of the nitty gritty. Um, okay, cool. So let me pull Unity up here. Um, and this is what the interface of Unity looks like. And this is that project that I was just demoing. So in general, Unity by default has a kind of main window that you can navigate around with your mouse. It's really useful to have a 3-button mouse for Unity. I know on some laptops that's hard to come by, but it's really useful because the right button and the middle scroll wheel do different things. So I'm zooming in and out with my middle, but with my right click, I can sort of move around the viewpoint. And then if I click with my middle, I can kind of drag back and forth, which is different than rotating with my right. But anyway, this is like the 3D scene that I'm working in. And then all the stuff around the side here, this is where you build your project. On the left side, these are all what Unity calls game objects. This is everything that's in the scene. So not only is it like the Buddha, which is here, but it's also like the player. And it's also like the properties that the player can teleport, for example. So when I say object, I don't just mean like a physical sculptural thing. I mean like any sort of concept in the piece of software like that you can teleport. That's also a game object. And so they're all here in a big list. And the only other thing that I would point you to about Unity is that, I don't know, I know the interface is probably small on some of your screens, but there's a little triangle, like a twirly, next to these game objects, some of them. And those ones have other game objects underneath. So it's sort of like a hierarchical structure, and it calls that childing. So a parent is the top game object, and then it has children. And so the child objects underneath can be affected by doing changes to the parent. Okay, so we're gonna, I won't get any deeper into that, but that's like, those are your game objects on the left side. On the bottom, this is sort of like your file structure in your computer. In fact, it is your file structure in your computer. So when you start a Unity project, it goes inside a folder. And any changes you make here in Unity are actually happening on your computer's folder as well. So inside my computer, like in Explorer, for example, I have this facet demo Unity project, and under assets, I have materials, models, scenes, right? Materials, models, scenes. If I change the name of materials here, it changes it on the actual computer as well. I just point that out because that's not the case in some other pieces of software that you might be used to, things like video editing software, or something like PowerPoint, where all the files that you're dragging in are all inside the PowerPoint file. This has a big folder structure. So why that matters is if you delete anything in there, it's gone. And if you change anything and Unity needs to go looking for it, you may confuse it. So So that's an important principle. And then the last thing over here is what's called the inspector. And if I click any object in the scene, you'll see properties that it has. One of the most important properties is what's called the transform, which just means where it is. You can change its position in X, Y, or Z. You can rotate it along the X, Y, or Z, and you can change its scale so that it's larger or smaller in all three directions. And then some game objects are going to have a lot more properties depending on what they are. So we'll be able to mess with that and add a couple of things here and there so you see what's going on. But in general, this is the interface of Unity. And then when you want to demo your thing, there's a play button up here, like a VCR style play button. And you'll see the piece of software run, and you can test it. So here's me testing it. And then when I'm done testing it, I turn off play and I go back here. Okay, so the next thing I think I'm going to do is start from scratch and show you how we got here. Okay, is everybody ready for me to do that, or do we have general questions before I go on?
I think I'm ready.
Okay, all right, cool. If do I dare? Yeah, let's start a new project just to show you the full process. When you start a new project in Unity, it asks you, do you want to make a 2D game, like something like Super Mario Brothers or whatever, a 3D game, which is what we're going to do, or there's some other options that are available for different kinds of development, mobile gaming, all kinds of stuff. So we're going to choose 3D. I'm going to give it a name, so Facet Demo 2, and I'm going to give it a location. So I, by default, have it set up in my documents /Unity projects, which is a folder I made. I'm doing this on a PC, but it would work very similarly on a Mac, incidentally. And then I'm going to hit create. The only other thing that I want you to know about Unity as we wait for it to fire up is, you know how if you're using Photoshop or any other kind of piece of like media authoring software, there will be updates periodically, right? New version of Photoshop out, like update. And in general, you would almost always say, yes, I will update, right? Like you mostly are like, right, I do. I want to be on the most current version. Unity, you have to think of it a little differently because it's like a software authoring piece of software. And so typically the workflow is more like, once you've committed to a version, like whatever the version is today that I start this project on, I'm not updating this for this project ever. Because a lot of things change from version to version, including like just the inner workings of how the programming, like grammar, so to speak, is done from version to version. So it's not uncommon for people who are making stuff on Unity to have lots and lots of versions of Unity installed. It has like a whole manager to deal with that called the Unity Hub, which since I have plenty of time to waste while it loads up a new project, this is the Unity Hub. And like, as you can see, all these projects have different Unity versions. And it's fine with that. It's got a whole system to work with that. But if I wanted to change the version and like update to a new one, I could potentially break my project. I could also fix my project after breaking it, but that's a lot of trouble. So I encourage you to sort of get in the mindset of like, whatever version I started with, that's the version that this particular project will be authored on. Okay, and we have finally caught up. So I'm going to show you this and close that one for now. All right. So same thing, only difference is we got nothing in it this time. So the first thing we want to do is let's create a floor. So I'm going to right click where my game objects list is over on the left side and do 3D object and cube. So what I'm doing is creating a new 3D object and it's going to be a cube. And now we've made our first thing. It shows up here and it's got a lot of properties over in the inspector. It has a position, which interestingly is not at 0, 0, 0. And that's a common thing that I tell all my students to get used to, like resetting that. When you put in a new object, you probably want to know where it is in the 3D world. And every once in a while, if your cursor is like way off in the distance somewhere, you can put in an object and lose it easily. It just ends up in the wrong place. So when you put in an object, if it doesn't come in at 0, 0, 0, you can right click and choose reset and just make sure, at least from the start, that we know where things are and we're centered. So what this is a cube 1 meter cubed. And we can change the scale here in all directions. You can click and drag, or you can just type. And so what I'm going to do is make a floor that's 30 meters in either direction and then just 1 meter deep. So now we have something to stand on, right? Next, I think my strategy is going to be, well, I'll build some walls too. So there's our floor, and now we're going to create another 3D cube. And in this case, same thing, reset the transform, but now I'm going to make it tall instead of wide. Okay, cool. So I've got a floor and a wall. I can change the position of this wall either by dragging or typing here in the coordinates or on this 3D cursor. If you see how there's like arrows pointing in any of the directions, I can grab those arrows and just drag the thing in whatever direction I want to. So that's what I'm going to do. Sort of build a wall on each side, and maybe in this case I need 30 instead of 20. So all right, let's say that's good for now. We've built the beginning of our museum, so to speak. I could imagine doing this for, like, if you had student work or scholarly work that you wanted to display in a more in an exhibition format, in a world where we were allowed to go see people and attend events. You know, this might be a way to substitute, you know, to kind of create a virtual walkthrough of scholarly findings or creative work or student work or something like that, and still give people a sense of how to navigate around it in 3D. So, okay, we've got a floor and a wall, and then, oh, one other thing I want to make you aware of, just for the sake of demoing it. Each of these, as you can see, is sort of like a boring gray. And down here in the inspector for each object, you'll see we had its transform. We've got a bunch of things that I won't get heavily into right now, but these are what make it a cube. The mesh is the term for the 3D sort of wireframe object. The mesh renderer is what allows us to actually see it. If I take off the mesh renderer, the object is still there, but we don't see it anymore. And then it also has what's called a box collider that allows things in Unity to know it's there. So just because there's a visual box doesn't mean that we won't fall through it when we try to stand on it, okay? So the collider is a box that mimics the shape of the visible box that is solid. So it knows it's being collided with. And then the last thing down here is the material. And a material is the skin, so to speak, of the object. And this is where we would change its color as well as its, reflectivity and all of these other sort of surface-oriented properties. So I'll make a new material just to demo how we do that, and we'll change a color here. We're going to right-click down here in the bottom in our assets, and I'll choose Create Folder. And I'm going to make a folder for materials. This is just modeling good practice, because like here I'll only make one, but in a big project you might have many, and it's good to be organized. And so then inside that materials folder, I will do Create Material. So that new material I will call gray. And the gray material, just like any other thing in Unity, has properties in its inspector. The only thing I'm really going to mess with here is what's called the albedo, which is the fancy 3D modeling term for color or hue. And so I'm going to give this a kind of a grayish color. And then I can usually, I say usually because sometimes Unity is a little fussy, I can usually just drag a material directly to an object. But if there are a lot of objects on the screen or things are layered or whatever, that might not work. So then you could drag it to the game object in the list. But okay, so now we have a floor that is darker and a wall that is lighter. Okay. There are other properties, obviously, on materials. And if you got into texturing and stuff like that, where you wanted like a photo to wrap around an object, you would just simply drag a photo into the albedo rather than a flat color. So if you had like a JPEG down here that was a kind of wrapping image, you could put that in the albedo instead of just color. All right. So what we've seen so far is that Unity can generate like basic 3D shapes without us being 3D modelers, right? Like you can make cubes, you can make spheres, anything that's here under 3D object, sort of pill shapes, cylinders, a plane, which is like a cube, except it doesn't have any thickness. It can generate a lot of things on its own, and then you just resize them to be, what you need. So that's how I built that whole museum structure before, when we were like going up ramps and having like angled ceilings and all of that. It's literally just cubes that have had their transform settings changed. The other resource that's really good for non-3D modelers trying to build something in Unity is what's called the Unity Asset Store. And so just like the iTunes Store or Google Play or any of these sort of like software stores that exist, Unity has its own what's called Asset Store. And in the newest version of Unity, the Asset Store has moved. They've put it into just a website now as a way to try to essentially speed things up in Unity itself. So there wasn't a whole lot of extra stuff to load. So it's slightly different. If you've ever used Unity before, like this literally changed recently. But you can still click Asset Store here and then choose Search Online, and it will bring you to the Unity Asset Store. And what's cool about the Unity Asset Store is, even though store is in the title, it's got tons of free stuff. So if I want to search for only free things, down here where it says free assets, 6,000 some free assets, I click that. And then it's got them all organized by category. Some of them are 3D objects like what I'm going to be after, but other ones are tools like to help you build or to help you program, or some of them are audio, special effects, fire, animations, all kinds of cool stuff. But we're going to look for some 3D objects to sort of populate our space here. So we don't have to be a 3D modeler, but we can still dress up our space. So it so happens I have some, like I said, cooking show. I have some like pre-baked that are already ready to go. Under columns, I figure I wanted to get some sort of museum-like architectural flourishes here. So I think I'm after these columns. So I chose that, and before, when I hadn't yet quote unquote purchased it, even though it's free, it would have said add to my assets. And then when I click that, it's going to associate this thing with my account. And if there's something that actually costs money, you know, you would pay with a credit card, and then you would own that asset, and that would be associated with your account too. So I grabbed these, and then I also grabbed those crystals. I had that sort of rainbowy crystal in the museum, which was this one, the stylized crystal. So both of these I have sort of pre-downloaded already. So let me show you how this works. Back in Unity, you go to Window Package Manager, and that's basically what this is telling you here too. You'll import these things from your package manager. So you can either follow this link, open package manager, or find it under Window Package Manager. And then here, it lists by default the packages in my project. And instead, I want to go to my assets. So this is everything that's already been, you know, associated with my account. So I'm after those columns. And if I have too many to find them, or I kind of only half remember the name, there's a little search box up here, and I can do columns. So here's that free pillars and columns. If I have not downloaded it yet, I can hit download. If I have, then, like, for example, crystals, I think I do have, I can hit import. And so I want to follow this workflow just so you see it. When I hit import, it shows me everything that's in that asset, which is a list of like game objects and stuff, and asks me, do I want to import all of this? In this case, yes, I do, but in some, you know, you might not need everything in your project. So anyway, I'm going to hit import, and then back here under assets, there is now a folder called Stylized Crystal. Inside most assets you get from the asset store, there will be a couple of things. One is a prefab, which is probably what you want to use. A prefab, like it sounds, is an object that's already built for you, prefabricated, right? It also has the component pieces, the mesh, which is like the wireframe, so to speak, the 3D shape of the object, and the texture, the picture that's kind of wrapped over that shape. Also, there is a sample scene usually in each asset from the asset store. I encourage you to be careful with the sample scenes. This is one of those things that you only learn by teaching students to do this stuff. I've never had this happen personally to my projects, but I had a lot of students lose their scene by opening the sample scene that was just used to prove, you know, it's there just to show you, like, how would you throw this asset in your scene. Anyway, what usually happens is a student did a bunch of work, they didn't save their scene, and then they immediately double click on this scene and they've lost theirs. So don't do that. In general, you probably don't even need their sample scene unless there's some real important thing you're trying to learn from how they used it. So we're going to go to the prefab and drag this in. And here it is. There's the crystal. This crystal is kind of small, and I liked the idea of making it like sort of a huge crystal. So I'm going to change our scale here to make it seem more like, I don't know, human scale or bigger. And that's all it takes. That's the wonder of the prefab, is like they've already put all of the properties together, the mesh and the texture together, so that it does what it's supposed to do. What's cool about this is, remember back at the beginning when I was like, here's a student project, it's like a maze and you can go through all these things. Literally all of that stuff was from the asset store. Like, those students made all of those virtual worlds just with free downloads from the Unity asset store. And they're meant for that. I mean, it's copyright free. It's like designed for doing this with. So that is a really useful thing for those of us who are not 3D animators or don't have an artist in our workflow pipeline. You know, you can still make really visually interesting spaces in VR. One other place that I would point you to, rather than only being stuck with what's in the asset store, is Sketchfab, which is a website that you can have a free membership on. And while it's another place you can buy things from, there are a lot of folks who are creating 3D scanned objects and providing them for free. Especially a lot of museums are 3D scanning their collections. Like this is from the Digital Atlas of Ancient Life, which has a lot of sort of like paleontology artifacts that are 3D scanned. So this is that big Tyrannosaurus skull that I showed you in the Finnish museum. So I'm gonna get that one. You would click download 3D model, and in general, you want it in the original format. If you can help it for Unity, OBJ is a great file format. This GLTF is not something that Unity deals with natively. So if you run into that on Sketchfab, which they do kind of like to use sometimes, it can be converted, like in a program like Blender, which is another free 3D program. But if you have no experience with that, I wouldn't necessarily tell you to go running to that solution. So I'm gonna go after something. I chose something in particular that's in OBJ because it'll be easy for us to bring it in. So I would click download, which I've already done incidentally, and I have it here. So here's that. Here's that T-Rex skull. They call it vertebrate Tyrannosaurus Rex skull. So anyway, that package is going to go directly into Unity. So I'm going to take this whole folder and just drag it into my assets folder. And so, like I said at the beginning, this is dragging that whole folder into your project folder on your hard drive. So now that project folder has gotten larger, and it has a new folder in it, and all of that stuff is there saved on your hard drive. And so you would go into it. In this case, the ones that come from Sketchfab have a little different file structure inside. They've got the source is what you're after. And then you want this thing, which to me always reminds me of a toaster, this tiny little icon here. I'm not sure what it's actually supposed to be, but it's the icon for the OBJ files. And so there's our T-Rex skull. So same deal, just different source to download from. So what what I can do here is move it around, rotate it, put it in whatever location I need it to be in. Here's something. This is worth noting. If I take a look over here on the left side under my game objects, this game object comes in a child of another game object. So there's like the object, the mesh, is called default, and it's a child of this PRI Tyrannosaurus Rex skull. The reason this matters is they each have a transform. And so if I change the transform on the child, you'll see it's like rotating around, the origin point is like way over here. Let's see if that's still the case when I do it here. It actually is on this one, but on some of them, that's not the case. So it can matter if you're rotating the child or the parent. But anyway, here we go. So this is going to be my my little mock-up here of our the start of our second museum. Okay, so before I get to making this into a VR project, because right now it's just a 3D world that has a camera in it, but the headset isn't attached yet. I want to stop and let people breathe, and also let people ask any questions that they have.
Ryan, I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Vicky. Just a quick question. Do you have any recommendations for computers? Do you need a very good computer, or can you just get by with a normal, let's say, TU supplied laptop or something like that?
That's a good question. So there's sort of a multi-part answer to this. What's cool about Unity is that it's pretty efficient. You can make, I'm going to say games because that's what it's like generally designed to do, but and 3D experiences, but you can make games that run on very limited hardware. Like people use Unity to make games for iPhones, etc. So you can run these pieces of software that you're generating and therefore run Unity pretty well on more basic computing hardware. The caveat is when you want to go to the headset. So what's going on to keep it short, what's going on with VR headsets is there are two. It's stereoscopic, it's 3D, so it's rendering two versions of everything it renders. So like when somebody has a fancy computer to play like fancy 3D video games, that fancy computer only has to render one version of it, one for the monitor. VR headsets have to render two simultaneously so everything is doubled just in terms of workload. And then also on top of that, there's like sending it out to the headset and tracking your movement and all the rest of it. So computers to run VR headsets are pretty hardcore. They definitely need a graphics card, typically like a NVIDIA GeForce, like at least a 1050 or the equivalent in the AMD world. And so it's sort of like a gaming computer that would do that. What's cool though is that the tool that I'm about to show you for us to make this into a VR project has a kind of a mock-up function for if you don't have a headset. So you can actually develop VR projects without having a VR headset. And that's what I had my students do this last spring. I was teaching a special topics in VR production, and we went online. I mean, we couldn't be at school anymore, And at first I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to continue teaching this class? But actually, with some creativity, it was pretty doable because you can. So anyway, the short answer, David, is all my students from home were able to use whatever laptops they happen to own without even owning headsets, and they still managed to author VR worlds that worked in headset, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm going to test out my computer, see if it can handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, you can do it on integrated graphics, is the short answer on Unity. You can definitely run Unity without having a dedicated video card. So don't let that stop you. You will know when it gets bogged down though, and that's all about how many complicated models did you put in your scene. If we stick with like cubes, we could do this all day, but the more T-Rex skulls that I put in there, the more it will slow down the computer, because they're built out of thousands and thousands of little tiny polygons. What other questions do folks have before I make this VR?
I have a question about one of the things you mentioned earlier. I think you point out a feature from the software. Mm-hmm. I know that with Unity you can create you call 3D objects, mm-hmm. and then later you mentioned a concept called materials. So I'm not sure. Do you by materials? Do you mean attributes associated with those objects, like color, texture, or am I understanding this correctly?
Yes, you're following perfectly. only distinction I would make from what you just said is that a material is just one of the things that could be an attribute to an object. So what a material can do is, here's that gray material I made. And over in the right, in what we call the inspector, this is all the properties of that material. So materials can do color, they can do shininess, smoothness, and then there are a bunch of what are called maps that can essentially be bumpiness. You can bring in like a photo that's like texture, that shows bumps, and that can become an implied texture on top of the material. It can even light up with what's called an emission. So you can make things glow. But material is basically the surface property of any visual object that's in Unity. So if you think of it as this T-Rex skull in and of itself is just like a wireframe. There's nothing, it's not brown, until we put the material on it. It just so happens that when we download things from Sketchfab or Unity Asset Store, they've already got the material like attached. So that's the only distinction that I would want to make is, theoretically, we could like make this our gray material instead. So like here it is with their material that's like from the actual 3D scan, but like now it's just gray. And if I make gray into green, green, there we go. Then now I've got a green skull, right? So that's what material is it's just the whole set of surface properties.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so everybody, I know it's been a lot of steps, but basically what we've done so far is we've learned that we can make 3D geometric objects and resize and reshape them and move them around. And that's how we made a wall and a floor. We learned we can change their color by creating a material and just dragging it to the object. And then we learned we can get more complicated 3D objects either by downloading them from the Unity Asset Store or from Sketchfab. And just with those sets of tools, you can make all of the things that I showed you at the beginning of this of this workshop. All of those sort of a museum, a room, a landscape, all of those things are within our grasp as long as we just find the right objects and move them around in the space. The only thing we haven't done yet is actually make it a VR project. And so the way we do that is also just through that asset store. So we're gonna do asset store, search online, and then here, this is just something I would want you to memorize or whatever if you're gonna try this at home. We're gonna download something called Steam VR. Steam like when you're cooking on a stove, Steam VR. And Steam VR is made by the Valve Corporation, which is like the game company that made Half-Life and Portal and all some of those famous video games, but they also run a video game store called Steam. Anyway, they've been a huge supporter of VR, and they put out this software development kit that's free that gives us all kinds of tools to just like make VR hardware work in Unity. So that's it. This solves all of our like, oh, I don't know how to program. I wouldn't know how to make a headset work or controller buttons work. This is going to be an end run around all of that. So same as getting any other asset, you would click on it and choose add to my assets. And then once it's done, we're gonna open it up in Unity through the package manager. So package manager, my assets, and then Steam VR, and we're going to import that. And that'll take a moment because it's got way more stuff in it than just the crystal. But this is going to, yeah, here's the huge list. Like, remember when I said before that it asks you like, which things do you want to import? So if you really knew like, oh, I only want certain aspects of this, you could skip a lot of them or whatever, but there's no need for us, for our purposes. We're just gonna hit import, and all of this stuff is gonna go into a Steam VR folder in the main part of our Unity project folder. And so what this all is a lot of pre-programmed scripts, pieces of programming that are going to make our hardware work. And then we can create interaction, like this ability to point somewhere and teleport there, for example, as a way of moving. We can do that just by dragging game objects into our hierarchy window here. So I'm just waiting for it to do its thing here. One thing that's cool about Steam VR, you may remember a little while back, I was saying assets usually come with a sample scene in them. You know, when you get a crystal, I don't necessarily need anybody to show me that it can be put in a scene. I understand that. But one thing that's cool about Steam VR is it has sample scenes that show you how you would like use Steam VR. It's almost like a manual that you explore simply by playing in someone else's project. Okay, so this is finally done, and it's showing me a bunch of stuff. This is basically saying, how do I put this easily? A scoped registry is like a dependency. It's like it's going out to the internet to grab some stuff that it needs, and we're just going to say that's fine. So we're saying okay to that. We don't need the package manager anymore, so we can close that. And then this window, it's telling us there's some settings that you should change to be compatible with Steam VR. It's telling you all of them, and it's saying, do you want me to change them for you? And I'm saying, yes, please do that. So hit accept all. And so it's changing a couple of our project settings without us having to go through and find them. So it's sort of cleaning up our mess and making things compatible for VR hardware right now. In general, the important thing that it's doing is it's changing the color space, which is how Unity renders light and color. There's basically two. There's linear and gamma, and so it's switching that as well as a couple other features. I'm just playing for time, y'all, while it does this. You don't actually need to know that. Okay, and then it really positive reinforcement. It tells me you made the right choice. Thanks, Steam VR. Okay, so now here is where we change. So again, I'm just hitting accept here. Here is where we changed from being, right now we're making like a game, and if we had hit play up until this point, all we would see is a sort of still image from where the virtual camera happens to be set in the project. I can't control it or move or do anything because I haven't built any system to do so. So in the scene here in the hierarchy, by default, we never put this in. This is just from the start. As soon as you start a Unity project, they give you a main camera. I don't want this main camera because what I want is for the headset to become the camera, right? Because that's how like moving the headset around will make it feel like you are the VR player, right? And Unity can only ever have one main camera showing at a time. If it has more than one, it gets confused. So we're going to click that main camera and hit delete. It's out of there. We don't need it. Instead, what we want is under our assets, under Steam VR, we want this thing called player. And just for the sake of demoing it, I want you to know that there's a little search box here near in your assets window. And I happen to know that what I'm after is called player. And rather than go searching through all these directories, I can just type in player and there it is. So I want the player prefab, which is the cube. And I'm going to put it here. So now what player is, even though it sounds like it's not, it's a camera, and we can twirl this parent object open and see, like, here's all these different things that make up the player. So there is a VR camera, and there are our hands, and there's a collider for our body, and there's all kinds of other stuff that you don't need to know about at all, because I barely even know what they are. That's why we're downloading Steam VR, because they did it for us, right? And so now, if we fire this up, no longer are we what would you call it? A still camera anymore. Now we can move. So we're going to hit accept, and then here, this is, I don't know if you can all see this. I recognize that it's probably pretty small on your screen, but in the top left of this corner, it's given me control instructions. It's telling me WASD on the keyboard, which is sort of standard if any of you play video games. That's like where you would control, like in lieu of the arrow keys. That's going to move the camera around, and right mouse is going to rotate, and left mouse is going to be the main interaction. So this is not me in the headset. I mean, you should be able to see on my camera. I'm not currently using the headset. This is the you don't have a headset version, right? So this is what they call the debug mode, I think is their term for it. So this is how my students made VR projects and tested them and moved around in them and all the rest of it without even having a headset at home, right? So if you right now, are interested in doing this the second we get off of here, download Unity, try this, and Steam VR will let you move all through your space and whatever, even without you having a headset. And it does that right out of the box as soon as you put the player character in there. Cool. The only other thing that I think is important for our purposes here is that we should give, if this is ever going to be seen by someone in a headset, they won't have that sort of mock-up of controls. They won't be able to like just magically move around with the keyboard. We would like them to use like VR controllers and just be able to point. And the easiest interaction for people usually when they start using VR is rather than float around with a controller, which can sometimes make people feel a little seasick. A lot of VR software likes to use this point and teleport to where you're pointed to format. So I just want to show you real quickly what it would take to make that happen. In Unity, we would right-click and create an empty object, which is a cool concept. You can just have a game object that's literally nothing. It's just sort of like a placeholder ready to be a parent. And I'm going to call it teleporting. And then under Steam VR, in interaction system, because we're trying to interact, right? We're going to choose teleport. And under teleport, we're going to choose prefab because it's already built for us, and grab teleporting. And I'm just going to child that under teleporting. And the reason I'm doing that is we need one more thing. We've got what I just did made Unity be able to talk to these controllers, and now it knows that if I press this button and point, it is supposed to teleport. The one thing it doesn't know is where is it allowed to teleport. And so Steam VR expects us to make certain places valid teleport locations. So here's how we would do that. I want to be able to teleport anywhere on this floor. So I click on the floor, and down here in the inspector, where we had all the other things, transforms and materials and all the rest of it, we can add another property to this floor. And I'm going to start typing teleport, because what I'm after is something called teleport area. And this teleport area is something that came with Steam VR. So if I add teleport area, now I've created this whole, well, teleport area. I don't know how else to say it. Now this area is a valid location to be teleported to. But you may notice it sort of replaced the cube, the floor, that we saw visibly. So rather than do it that way, I think I'll just duplicate this floor. So here's our cube, which I can rename floor. Learn to spell floor. And then if I right click and duplicate, now floor 2, I'll call teleport area. And this is the one that we should have with a teleport area. So now we get, we can have our cake and eat it too, right? We can see the floor, but we also have a teleport area. If I run this now, it actually has like this visible graphic that looks all like cyber. I don't want that in my scene. So all I'm gonna do is turn the mesh renderer off on the teleport area object. So now we've basically got an invisible object that takes up exactly the same space as the floor did, but it's a valid teleport area. And I can child that under teleporting too, just for prettiness. And so with that, we've got a floor that we can teleport all around, and using these controllers and the headset. The only tip I would give you on the teleport floor thing is every once in a while I've seen it get mad when it literally is exactly in the same place as the floor object. So sometimes what I do to avoid that, I literally had this happen yesterday when I was testing out the museum I made. I just grab the teleport floor and just move it like infinitesimally above, just so there's like a tiny little distinction between where one object is and the other, because Unity does sometimes get mad when things completely overlap. And that'd do it. That's essentially the building blocks of what leads to this larger piece.
Ryan, I have a question. I know that we're a little bit over time, but I have a question. How do you distribute it? So how do you send it out to the people that need to see it? Or how do you ask your students to distribute it?
That's a good question. So while we're working in Unity, Unity is, each project is a folder. So here is the Facet demo was the one that had like multiple floors that I had built in advance. Facet demo 2 is the one we just built. If I wanted to send this to you, David, and I was like, I want you to help me work on it, I would just like make a zip file of this whole folder and send it to you. And then you could open it up in Unity just like I did. But once we get done and we say like, I'm done with this, I want to give it to people who don't know anything about Unity, I just want to run it at a museum or at a film festival or whatever, then I would finish my project and go File, Build and Run. And it's going to ask me where. And, I'm just going to make a folder that says builds and select that folder. And then it's going to ask me a bunch of properties. Oh, actually, it's already got the settings. So let me back this up. Let me show this to you. I would do build settings first. I expected it to ask me this, but it remembered from the last time. This is where you're choosing what am I making this for. So there's standalone PC Windows would make a .exe file that anyone with Windows could double click and it would run. Like the same way that, sorry, my camera apparently freaked at some point while I was doing all this. The same way that, I don't know, that Minecraft runs when your kid clicks on it or whatever. It doesn't require anything else except itself. But if you were trying to author for any of these things, you can see you can make games for the Apple TV, for PS4, for iPad and iPhone, whatever. You know, you can author software for all of those things with Unity. So you would choose your platform and then build, and it will take some time and it will dump out an exe file that that runs on its own, and then you could distribute it any way you could distribute a file or software or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just send it into Apple for the App Store.
Yeah. I mean, there's an approval process for some of these places. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, Unity. Have you ever seen like Monument Valley or any of those like iPad games that a lot of iPad games are made in Unity? Like this is literally the software that they are using to make most of the games that you've seen on your phone or on your tablet.
No, I haven't seen that game. I've only really played Battleship on the iPhone.
Okay. But yeah, it's there's basically like two pieces of software that do this that are not proprietary, like either Unity or Unreal. And most games are built in one or the other unless the company is big enough to build their own in-house like substitute for Unity or Unreal.
Very cool. Anyone else have any questions for Ryan? If not, just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time to plan and prepare for this workshop, and definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I fully recognize that when I go through one of these that's tech heavy, I get that it's going to be overwhelming. But I hope that if you're interested in following along through this, you know, a second time with Unity up and running, we'll send out the recording for everybody so they can try it out. And then, you know, like I said, eventually the literal same tools that I used just now and showed you, let us do this. This is that teleporting that I was building. And all of these objects and all of this space was made just, again, with cubes for the architectural structure and with freely downloaded assets from the asset store and Sketchfab. And there's my hand.
And hopefully, when I play around with it, I'll see if I can import some stuff that I've created myself. I'm excited for that. Yeah,
absolutely. So incidentally, if you wonder like what David means by create yourself, the previous workshop we did showed how to do some of that 3D scanning with something as easy as your cell phone and an app. So you can do some 3D model creation yourself just through photography, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And that too is recorded and available.
Yep. I'm going to post on the chat a link to the next event that Ryan is running. It's going to be on editing 360 and VR video in Adobe Premiere, I believe, right, Ryan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, today we looked at something that's a little bit more like video game design, but if you know a little bit about video editing, I can show you how VR video camera footage can be edited next time.
Yes, and one last thing before everyone heads out. Again, appreciate you guys joining us and taking the time. If you don't mind just filling out an anonymous survey, it's a 5 or 6 question survey on your way out. And once you're done with that, I think you can head out. But thank you so much for joining us today, and please be on the lookout for more events from Ryan and the rest of the team. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.